Hi everyone, my name is Ashwin, and today we'll be talking about how to create customer-centric products through experimentation. So today I'll be talking about the learnings that I have had building products uh, for Wingify, for VWO. So I worked in the new products team before working on VWO, the product, and I worked on building products from scratch and getting them from 0 to 1, get them traction, get them their first customers and revenue, and scale it from there. So I've built a lot of products that have failed, but one of the products that really worked well for us was ConvertFly. It was a messenger marketing platform that we built for e-commerce stores and launched it on the Shopify App Store. We built it from scratch and we got it to the top charts of, we got it at the top of the charts within the Shopify App Store. And right now it is being merged into the VW optimization platform. So that's pretty exciting. So I'll tell you about the learnings that I've had going from 0 to 1 on this product. Then I'll also be talking about applying the same learnings to the A/B testing reports that we recently revamped within VWO, where we increased the satisfaction score by more than 2x. So the learnings are similar. The kind of process that I followed was similar. So it'll be very interesting discussing my learnings and talking about how I use experimentation to actually improve the product and also build a product from scratch. So when we think about building products, lean startups methodology comes to mind. Building a prototype really, really fast, and then iterating upon it, learning from it, and then improving upon it as quickly as possible. And you repeat this cycle as often as you can until you're able to solve a problem for the user. So we actually tried doing that with ConvertFly, but few things did not work. So what happens is that when you're playing in a competitive market, it's really difficult to nail down what you should differentiate upon. So if you look in the framework, the first step is idea itself. So coming up with an idea that is in the ballpark of what your customers want is tough to nail down. And what happens is that you sometimes end up shooting in the dark a lot, or you end up optimizing something that your customers do not really want. And because you have such a strong bias when you're building something, that's something that you have built and you think it would work, it's very hard to realize that it's not working for the end customer. So it's very hard to differentiate if you just take an idea and start building on it without really understanding what your customer is looking for. And in my case, what happened was we had a very small team of 1 engineer and 1 designer and myself. So getting them to build ConvertFly for, let's say, about 3 months for the first prototype, which I'll just share, and then for it to not work, it almost becomes demoralizing for them. And it can sometimes even end up killing teams, and like the projects stop. So getting this right is important. So before I jump into the framework or the steps I would share with you on how to get that right, let me actually show you what ConvertFly looked like in its first iteration. So, ConvertFly was a messenger marketing app. So Messenger is very, very interesting because a lot of conversations are happening because of the change of behavior in how people interact with each other. And by giving brands an opportunity to converse and communicate with the customers on that channel, they were able to extract a lot of interaction and a lot of engagement with the end customer. So they would see 4x higher CTRs and 5x increase in engagement just by interacting or sending messages on Messenger. So the value proposition was incredibly high for someone to use our product. But this was the interface that we showed them. And it was something that our customers really did not understand. And how we knew that was we had a good amount of installs, but less than 10% of the customers actually made these campaigns live. So what we were trying to do here was asking them to select the products they want to run the campaign on, asking them, like the time they would like, the time intervals after which they would like to show the widget to collect subscribers, and then what message do they want to send them on Messenger. It was very confusing. It was Actually, it was confusing for the Shopify App Store owners. But why we built this in the first place was because in my SaaS experience, I've looked at products that have been built for marketers. And this is what marketers want, right? They want flexibility. They want, a lot of power to create the experience that they want to create. And they do not mind customizing and going through these different conditions and customizing it the way they want to create the customer experience. But, once this failed, we, though obviously those assumptions went out of the window, and we realized we really need to talk to the customers. Before this, I almost thought of killing this project, but I thought, I should really talk to someone and ask, what happened, what went wrong. And we started off, we just got a couple of people on calls because, when you have a product that the customers are not using, they're not really excited to talk to you. But we did end up getting a couple of people on the calls. And one thing that we figured out was, our target audience was behaving completely differently. So these were stores that had, one or two people working in it, mostly the founders, and they were doing everything. They were doing sourcing of the products, shipping of the products, handling the accounts, handling marketing, sales, everything. So these are people who are donning a lot of hats, and maybe marketing is not one of their strong points. And they're looking for products that actually simplify the process of implementing complex marketing campaigns for them. They do not want to hire an agency and spend dollars there, or they do not want to, or they do not have the expertise to create a very customized experiences that they would like to create on their stores. So once we understood that, we used that information to create this drastically different version of ConvertFly, where we made sure we did not have any kind of technical jargon at all. And we focused on giving them very, very specific tools to achieve what they want to achieve. So to increase subscribers, we had subscriber tools that they could just click on view, review, and just turn it on. So the whole idea was to limit the number of interactions, and every click should matter. And we wanted to make sure that a user does not take more than 2 clicks to actually turn on a campaign. So these are the subscriber widgets. I'll show you an abandoned cart recovery campaign within the product. So as you can see, we made sure everything is already there. We had pre-filled templates where we would pick up information from the Shopify API and pre-fill it and customize it for their end customers, have the copy in place, have the products in place, have the trigger points in place. And if they want to edit, they can. But a lot of people just turned on this version and they clicked on turn on, and it was live. The cool thing about this interface was that we had people activating our product in less than 5 minutes in most of the cases, and 80% of the customers actually turned on these campaigns. And before that, we had less than 10% of the people turning on the campaigns. So by understanding the customer first and then iterating on the product, we were able to get the experience right. We were able to solve the right problem. And because of that, we were able to create a compelling product. So the crux of this is that you really need to understand who are your customers and what do they actually want. And it's not about what you think they want. A lot of times we assume we know the customer. It may work if you have the industry experience, you've been in the shoes of someone who has solved similar problems, and you're solving the problem because you're aware of what's going on. But most of the time, that's not the case. And if you're in those shoes, you really need to understand and figure out who your customer is and what they actually want. So in the previous example, I thought we were handling someone who had the proficiency of using marketing tools or had some experience in marketing. Instead, I was solving a problem for someone who was owning an online store and handled everything and did not have that expertise that I expected them to have to use the product. And I learned it the hard way by actually building, sharing it with them, and saw horrible engagement and then kind of reaching out to them again and figuring out who they are first, and then building something that was compelling for them. Then you need to really understand what are the problems, or what is the problem that this customer is facing, and what is the motivation for this customer to actually solve this problem. So in our case, in ConvertFly, the problem was that people were tired of the returns that they were diminishing returns that they were getting through their email campaigns. And as people get more and more accustomed to email and the messaging that goes in there, you require drastically differentiated messaging, drastically differentiated copy, to really get their attention and engage with them. So understanding that they wanted to have more engagement so that they could impact the revenue that they could recover or revenue that they could create through promotional campaigns was a very important aspect. So understanding what motivated them to actually use or understand my product was important. So let's unpack motivation. So motivation could be something very selfish. So I've got a clock app. All of the phones have it. The motivation for setting up the alarm on the phone is to make sure that you wake up at a particular time in the morning. I want to be ready for the day, reach office on time. It's a very selfish reason. I want my day to start at the right time. It could also be financial. So, a lot of SaaS companies like VW or HubSpot have partner programs. So the motivation of the partners is to increase their revenue, increase the number of leads that they can generate, and increase the revenue that they create from these leads by partnering with platforms like HubSpot or VW. That could give them that thought leadership and attract leads for them, and create business. And it could also be something where people want to show that they belong, that socially they look superior, or socially they get recognized. And this was shown in a lot of the games apps. So, for something like Fortnite or PUBG that people play, obviously there's a selfish motivation there, a very personal motivation where people want to get entertained, or people want to fill up time with something interesting, with something exciting. But the place where it really, starts getting traction is actually getting the leaderboards into place, or getting your friends onto the platform, because then you want to be the best, and you want to show that you are the best in the game. And that motivation plays a very important role. So in that case, you have two motivations in place. One is to obviously be entertained, and the second one is to be the best amongst your friends. So understanding what motivates your customer is important, because that would play a role in how you tackle the problem. And in the so extending on that, in the B2B space, that motivation differs from buyer to user. In the B2C space, someone who's purchasing the app is also someone who's using the app. But in the B2B space, the buyer's motivation could be very, very different from the users. So you need to really understand how those needs are differentiated. And a lot of successful B2B SaaS products, they actually make sure that both the buyer's motivation and the user's motivation are taken care of, and they're dealt with within the product. And that's where you create a compelling product that people want to buy and also use. A lot of times when people are building new products, they actually skip one of these parts, and that's what leads to the failure of the product or lack of adoption of the product, even if people buy it. So let's take the example of VW. So what would be a buyer within VW? It would be someone who's a marketing manager or director looking to, this is one buyer persona that I'm talking about as an example, a marketing manager or director looking to consolidate multiple tools to streamline data, attribute impact of the marketing campaigns that they are running, and make better processes and decisions that impact the business goals of the organization. The friction is that, when they start using multiple tools, for email marketing, they're using something else. For testing, they're using something else. For their channel marketing, they're using other tools. the data is fragmented and it's all over the place, right? And it's hard to really understand what's the impact of the overall marketing campaign. So that's the friction for them to consolidate all of these tools. And by giving them a platform where they can consolidate all of their customer marketing or customer experience efforts, we simplify this for them. In comparison, a user is looking to come up with insights as quickly as possible, test them, and create wins that has an impact on the business metrics. So this is someone who's actually using the platform. This helps them get an appraisal, get recognized within their companies also. So obviously they need to create these wins to create successful campaigns that help them succeed in their job, but then also get recognized for their efforts, because we quantify the changes that they've made. We quantify the impact that they create. And the motivation for a user is completely different than a buyer. And the friction is coming up with ideas that create that impact. And coming up with those ideas is hard. So that's why we have services that we provide them. We have the idea factory where they could see what other companies are doing and what kind of experiments they're running. So as you can see, if we do not take care of both of these needs, the platform would kind of fail. And as we diversify our customers, so let's say the partners that I talked about, if the partner program that we have, the need is completely different. They're motivated by money that is created for them and the leads that we generate for them. And that would be a completely different segment, a completely different motivation that needs to be handled very differently than the points that I showed you. So in the previous slide, I talked about the friction, what motivates these customers, and then the friction in actually solving, in actually achieving that motivation. And you need to realize that what's the friction they're facing to solve the problem. And to really unpack this, you need to understand the process that they follow. What is their workflow? And what roles do current competitors play in that process? So you should not just look at the features that your competitors are creating, but really try to understand how your customers are doing things right now. And what are the gaps in that process, and what gaps are being filled by tools right now. Some gaps are never filled by tools, and you need to recognize that in the process. And in some cases, you would see that they're not using any tools at all. It's a manual process. They're doing something on Excel sheet, or they take their own notes. It's a very manual thing that they're doing. That means even if the threshold of solving the problem is high, they're still solving it. That means the motivation is incredibly high. On the other side, what if it's something, it's a problem that they have, but they're not doing anything about it? So you need to realize, is the problem worth even solving? So I'll give you an example. The sales teams that we have, the inside sales teams that we have in India, not a lot of them actually use coaching tools out there like Gong or a couple of other tools that are out there that actually translate what they're saying on calls, because our accent is different, and most of the NLP research that has been done are done in certain accents. So now a lot of the companies are not using those tools. So it's not that sales coaching is not a problem for them. It's just that there's no tool right now that actually simplifies the solution. So right now we are ignoring that problem completely. So tomorrow, and there are a lot of competitors that are coming up in this space where they're trying to solve that problem first before actually bringing out the solution to the market. So unless and until you do not solve that aspect of the problem or the workflow, there's no point bringing a product out there, which will not get adopted in this particular market. And you also need to realize that motivation changes over a period of time. And I think the best example for this would be Facebook. So, when Facebook, let's say a decade ago, we used to share so much personal information on Facebook. I would share what I was thinking, what I was eating that day, random thoughts that I had in my head, and I would share all that. But right now, what do I share? Maybe, a couple of, music videos, maybe a couple of, couple of interesting articles that I've read, and share that on, Facebook. But that's about it. And this is one of he's a writer in BuzzFeed, and it's very interesting, right? On this day feature, it actually reminds him of how much lower the threshold to post used to be. And that's the change in the motivation of the user. People are not motivated enough to share, personal content on Facebook. They are more interested in sharing content that can give them more likes, or can show them in a better light. So the need has gone from like a personal interaction to something that they want to share socially on the platform, in comparison to Instagram, where it's much more personal. People are much more comfortable sharing what they're doing in the day. And that's why something like stories, when Facebook copied it from Snapchat, worked on Instagram but did not work on Facebook, because the motivation of the user was completely different than what the feature was built for on Snapchat, which was a very personal interaction. So why I've talked about all of this is because these understanding the customer is an important part. And every time we think of experimentation, we think of doing it after we have built that first prototype, or after we have built that first design that we have just thought about from our head. And I feel like because the markets are so competitive right now, and because there's so many products out there, you really cannot shoot in the dark, because a lot of people are thinking about solving that same problem. And you really need to understand the customer first before you start tackling the solution. You really need to dig deep into the problem, uh, talk to customers, iterate on it, and optimize it first before you get into the development. So what you really need to do is define what the problem is, uh, and the motivation that you are trying to achieve if you solve it for your customer. You need to talk to your customers to validate these needs. So you need to create like a business case that you can take to your customers again and again. Talk to your customers, see if they're reciprocating things that you have in the business case. If they're not, learn from it, iterate, and then build on top of it. You'd really need to understand how they're looking to solve that problem right now. And you need to look at both patterns and anomalies. So patterns are something that give an idea that, yes, this is a problem that happens to a lot of people. But anomalies help you to figure out, oh, what are those interesting things or different things that people are doing to actually solve the problem. And sometimes it ends up being a very big differentiating factor in the products that you create. And you also need to look at how the competition is playing a role uh, in the workflow right now, and how are they solving it, what are the gaps that they're leaving, and how do those gaps, if you solve those gaps, what kind of impact would it have on improving or achieving the kind of solution or kind of results that you want to create for the end customer. So what you need to do is create a version of the business case instead of actually developing the product. You need to create the business case, and as I said, talk to your customers and see if they're saying the things that you have put down as assumptions. So talk to them, figure out what problems they face, figure out the workflow that they actually figure out the workflow first, figure out what problems they face in that workflow, what tools are they hiring to actually solve those problems. Are certain parts of the process manual or not? Have an understanding of that. What gaps are these tools leaving in the workflow? If there are no tools, understand how they're solving the problem right now, and get a very, very deep understanding. You need to address the motivation of both buyers and users. You need to be aware why someone is actually solving this problem in the first place. And you need to understand the motivations, and it could be in layers, right? On surface, it may feel like it's a personal thing that they're looking to do for themselves, like maybe Google Docs. Maybe I'm looking to have notes in one place, but then I also need to collaborate with someone else. So if I were to create Google Docs, if it did not exist, I should know what I'm trying to do with Google Docs that did not exist with Microsoft Office, and then build on top of that. So having that collaboration in place, solving for solving for a gap that was left by the competitor. So understanding that is important. And also look at anomalies, how people are solving the problem, something different that stands out, something that sticks, that ends up being a differentiating factor sometimes. So that's where you need to experiment, either within the product or with your designs, to actually see how it impacts their behavior, or how it impacts the way they react to your solution. So I'll actually, before I take you to the next step, I'll actually show you, just one second. Yep. So I'll actually wanted to show you the template, and I would also share it with you as a PDF that you can download after this talk, and feel free to use it the way you like. So this is what it looks like. This is something that I've built, that we do at VWO. So if you're building a new feature, it's important to understand who is this feature for, what is the summary, so what is the capability of the feature, and what is the benefit that it's providing. And we need to make sure that if the reader did not read anything else, just read this paragraph, they should know what is going on. It's important to know what are the business metrics or the impact that you're trying to create. MRR contribution, are you trying to reduce churn? Or if you're building new products, what are the key activities that you want the users to do? You can actually have that as your success metric or business impact that you want to create. Exactly describing the problem you're solving. How is the problem solved today? What's the process and tools that people use? How is the competition solving it? And then how to get started. So if you're building a solution, how would someone get started with that solution and use it? And then you can also imagine a customer using this, and create a quote from that customer, who is delighted by this feature. So I think Amazon uses this template, or similar template, and it's a great way to actually imagine or reverse engineer what a successful product or a successful feature will create an emotion within a customer. So understanding that would be important, and empathizing with that would be important when you write the customer quote. And then you also give them a closing and call to action, like what should they do next, or where should they go after this, and how should they explore the feature, and stuff like that. So having this story in place is important. Having this business case template in place, and filling it out with your first assumptions and your first idea of the product that you're trying to build, or the feature that you're trying to build, is important. And then start talking to your customers and see if these things that you have assumed are coming out. So asking them and seeing if it connects with the story that you're actually going to build, and if the motivation that your customer is talking about is actually being dealt with in the business case. So you need to talk to customers and keep on iterating on top of this as you move from one conversation to another. So let me go back to the presentation. So, design also plays an important role. So at the beginning, you would have assumptions, you would have a story that you would want to hear from the customers. After a few iterations, you start hearing that story from the customers. You will be able to nail down a lot of their concerns and a lot of their workflows once once you get deeper into it. Then what you can start doing is, when it starts repeating, you can actually go into the design process and start creating wireframes to actually show them what you're thinking about and take them to the next level of imagination. But at this point of time, a lot of times when you do it in isolation, as far as design thinking is concerned, what happens is the wireframes are probably not on point, because it's something that's out of your imagination, and it's not something that's solving a specific problem. And design is always done by a team other than yours, someone who's at least in the teams that I've worked from. It's a bit they are learning about the problem from you. So if you have those conversations under your belt, and if you've iterated on the business case and you're reverse engineering it, when you're creating that first wireframe or you're creating that first design touch point, they have exposure to the kind of problem they're trying to solve. And you'll have clarity in that design. So when you take that to customers and they do not interact with it, or they do not respond to it the way you would like, that interaction or that friction would actually give you a lot of insights on how to improve your product. Make sure that you, again, address motivations of both buyers and users when you're going through this process. And if you have anomalies, it's a great time to actually put those anomalies and see if they can act as differentiators from one version to another. If you're creating 3 versions of interactive designs, make sure you know what motivations or what insights you're actually trying to implement on that iteration. And then you should also be aware about the differences that you have from one iteration to another in each of the versions, so that you can see what are the differences that you have brought into the design that's actually causing the reaction from the customer, and how is that reaction different from one design to another. So understanding that is important, especially the casuality aspect of whatever changes you bring in design because of the business case. So again, collecting this information and iterating and optimizing this information is important. So for the A/B testing reports that we revamped within VW, this is a screenshot of the navigation bar in Confluence for this project. I cannot share the business case, but I would share the kind of things that we covered. And as you can see, we had the competitor analysis, we had the customer feedback, the design feedback that we shared based on the business case. And then, we also ran a survey within. So the advantage there was that, the product was already out there. So we ran VW surveys on top of the reports that were already existing and get feedback on it, and also create a baseline of the CSAT score on which we would, and that became the metric that we were trying to improve. So it gave us feedback. It gave us emails of people that we could interact with amongst our own customers and who were willing to give us feedback. And we also got the baseline. So that was something very, very interesting. And we also got a lot of internal feedback and quantitative data that was already there in the system. Obviously, some things would not be available if you're building a new product, but that's where, again, it becomes even more important to get the business case right, to make sure you start on the right point and you're actually solving a problem that matters. So for the reports, this was the older version that we had. So when we were talking to the customers, one thing that became clear, the motivation was for them was to create those winning, to find that winning way, or to create those winning tests and come out with great results. And this was the place where they were evaluating the numbers. And one thing we realized that at times they were getting confused with the ranges and the way we had expressed our statistical numbers in the table. And we had few things that are really powerful from a statistical standpoint, but confused some of our customers. And they also wanted to see impact across multiple goals. And that's something that they wanted to do because they wanted to not only understand the impact it had on their primary metric, but also on the other metrics that they were tracking. So these were just few of the insights that I'm discussing. But the motivation was to get those winners and was to understand the impact of what they have done. And it was a very exciting moment for them. And if they struggled with this report, it became a frustrating point for our end customers. So we try to understand where they were getting frustrated in these reports, create a business case around it, things that are important, prioritized it, and actually fixed it in the first version itself. So the version that we created after this was something like this. And one thing that is very interesting about these reports is that it looks much more simpler and to the point and cleaner than the previous reports, but it's more powerful. So you see these settings tabs, so you can actually customize the entire report. If you want to see the graph first or the numbers first, we also have a lot of numbers that are very specific to our advanced users who know statistics, and they can introduce those numbers in these reports. You can compare goals, you can put in your segments, and slice and dice as much as you want, and add learnings while you're doing so. So all of the key activities that we expected the user to do, we got it right in the front and center of this report, but did it in a way that they understood what was going on and became a better decision-making tool for them. And all of this was done within the first iteration because we did the heavy lifting of understanding the customer needs, the changing needs of the customer, and make all of these changes. And we took care of simple use cases as well as advanced use cases. And that's why we also introduced 2 new graphs on this, because we realized the advanced users require more power that was not available on other tools, and also within our tool that we introduced in the new reports. So the result of this was that we increased, just by the first iteration, we increased the satisfaction score by more than 2x on our reports. And since it became clearer for us that what the user was trying to achieve with these reports, we were able to create a pipeline of ideas that we could iterate upon now and A/B test to improve that satisfaction score even further, because we know where we want to go, and we are not optimizing for the wrong metric or optimizing for something that the user doesn't care about. So so once you have launched a product, what do you need to do next? You need to create baselines that measure the motivation of both your buyers and users. So again, for example, in VWO, A/B test is the key activity that shows that they are actually using the tool for what they hired the tool for. And if they're not doing that, then it becomes a problem, right? So we're looking at monthly active testers within the tool. So having those baselines that translate the motivation of your end customers is important. If it's financial, make sure that's part of it. If it's social, make sure the number of shares or the number of shares that you have per user, and the degrees of sharing that is happening. You're capturing that through the metrics that you create. You create for the feature or the product that's in place. You obviously need to know what are the key activities. So if you do not want to be fancy with your data, make sure the key activities are being measured, and you're measured in a way that you can compare them from one time period to another. So in our case, someone creates an A/B test, once in a month. So that's kind of the time limit that I would look at, and then use that as a measure of like the interactions or the number of frequency. The frequency of the key activities that they're doing in that time period. Have feedback loops within the product. So we ran a survey on the product, on the reports itself, similar to what Uber does. Once you finish a ride, it would show you, it would give you an option to give ratings to your driver. Similarly, when someone came into a report and spent, let's say, about 2 minutes into the reports, which is the ideal time that we expect a user to take, or have a decent enough idea what's going on in a test, and ask them if they were satisfied with the reports or not. So having those kind of feedback loops within your product is important, so that you can understand that after a key activity or an experience has been delivered, how does the customer feel? And if you can capture that, it would give you a lot of insight on how to actually improve your product further. If possible, use tools like Segment. Segment can give you events, and you're able to figure out the number of events that people are taking, or the frequency of it within a time frame. And if you want, you can reduce or increase those frequencies based on the kind of product or feature that you're creating, and really optimize for that. You could also use qualitative research products like VW User Insights to know or to visualize how the customers are using your product right now, and how they're interacting with the product, and what parts of the product they're exploring, and what parts of the product they're not. And you can especially look at sessions where people are not finishing your key activities, or they're abandoning your key activities, and that could give you a lot of insights. And obviously, you need to talk to your customers, because the motivation changes over a period of time, and you need to be on track with your optimization program, and then also understanding customer needs, at improving customer needs or maturing customer needs at regular time intervals, to keep on top of a great user experience for your end customers. So once you have all of this feedback, once you have all of this information, once you know what you're optimizing for, you're also talking to your customers just to see how they're maturing while using your product. You'll have a pipeline of ideas that you would want to actually implement using something like VWO, and experiment on improving the adoption of the key activities within the product. So you can actually create a pipeline of ideas that actually implement. So if you do this, so if you do this, what happens is that you're actually optimizing for an experience that matters to your end customer. You are continuously optimizing, and you're continuously addressing the motivation of the end customer. And since you have worked on the business case, and that story is clear, you can amplify this through marketing, through branding, and get the point across. By having a strong business case in place, what it does is also gives a lot of clarity to your marketing teams or your product marketing teams, and they could really fly using it, and give you great results. So if you look at the framework again, I would say the first part where it says ideas, really concentrate on that and focus on figuring out who the customer is, what are the problems that they're facing, what is their motivation to solve that problem, what are the friction points that they are facing in solving that problem. Understand that and create and narrow down the problem that you're trying to solve, and find something that is worth solving in that problem, and solving that problem better than what your competitors are doing. Once you have that initial point right, the cycle itself, when you start optimizing, you will, with every iteration, you keep on getting great and great results, because you're focusing on the right thing, on the right problem, on the right motivation to solve. And remember, 70% of the SaaS unicorns out there right now are newer versions of existing problems. So if you look at Zoom, if you look at Salesforce, a lot of these companies out there are actually solving the problems that already existed. They're just solving these problems better. So instead of solving unique problems, you can actually solve a problem uniquely, and get a lot, and create something exciting that people would love to use. All right, so that was my talk. Thanks for attending. This was my first talk, and I'm really excited to get feedback on it. So feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. Reach out to me at my hashtag Ashwin_Gupta. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. Just search for Ashwin Gupta VWO, or linkedin.com/in/06Ashwin. I would love to have a conversation around this with you. Thank you for listening to my talk. Take care. Bye.